Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of the Roundabout Way of Fate. This will be Part 5, Chapter 3, entitled The Alley. His mother is surprised, to say the least, when he comes home late with a kitten in his arms. He explains that he found him in the forest, not mentioning the dog or the probably illegal trespassing. Inko listens with a look on her face, saying, "I know where this is going," but smiles when he tells her how he healed the kitten's wounds. Finally, he gets to asking if they can keep him, and she hesitates. "Please, Mom," he begs. "I'm almost 7. I can take care of a cat. I promise I'll feed him and clean his litter box and brush his fur and—" He goes on and on about all the things he'll do, and to his delight, he sees her expression start to soften. He gives her his best puppy dog eyes, and she sighs heavily. There's a moment of silence. Then she admits, "He is awfully cute," and Izuku knows that he has won. Kachan is stunned. Then he huffily grumbles. Of course. The only thing he tells him before he goes home is to not name it something stupid. So, of course, Izuku decided to name the kitten Sushi, after the dinner he has that night. Kachan thinks it's stupid, but Kachan is a biased party because he never liked the cat to begin with, and it becomes pretty clear early on that Sushi doesn't like him either. They take Sushi to the vet during the weekend and learn that he's a mix of Maine Coon and some other breed, so he's going to grow pretty big. Izuku thought, based on his current size, that perhaps Sushi was around 4 or 5 months old, but apparently he's only 2 months. Inko's eyes widen when she hears this, and she suddenly looks rather apprehensive. Thankfully, though, Sushi settles into their life fairly easily. He's fun to play with, and the Midoriyas are more than happy to spoil him. He enjoys laying on Izuku's desk while he does homework and claws at his pencil when he decides he needs a break. He gets along with Inko well enough, but it's clear that Izuku is his favorite. Not that the boy is complaining. But man, it's almost comical how much Sushi hates Kachan. He doesn't puff up his fur and hiss. No, he's much more elegant than that. Whenever the blonde comes over, Sushi will plop himself right in Izuku's lap and just glare at him, judgmentally. And it is glaring. There's no other way to describe it. Inko thinks it's hilarious how expressive the cat is. He can communicate exactly what he's thinking just by looking at you. And he's never thinking anything good about Kachan, but the feeling is mutual. Izuku nearly pisses himself laughing when he walks into the room one day to find Kachan and Sushi having a glaring contest. "You think you're fucking better than me, huh?" Kachan growls. "Think staring at me will freak me out? You're just a stupid-looking furball that batted your eyes into a new family, but I've known Suku for a hell of a lot longer than you have, so back off, fleabag." Behind him, Izuku is silently wheezing with laughter. He tries not to draw attention to himself, but he can't help the snort that escapes him. Kachan whirls around with wide eyes, and Izuku just loses it. He bursts out with laughter as Kachan sputters indignantly and shrieks, "How fucking long have you been there?" Izuku's laughing is so hard he can't even breathe, let alone respond. His laughter angers Kachan even more. "Oh, piss off," he screeches. "That cat's got a fucking attitude and you know it. Fuck knows why you keep him around." From the other room, Inko gently scolds Kachan for cursing. Despite his mirth, Izuku notices the blush on his friend's cheeks and tries to control his laughter, but he ends up just wheezing even harder. It doesn't help that Sushi is still sitting regally on his dresser, giving Kachan a smug look. Eventually, Kachan just grabs Izuku and drags him outside for another fighting lesson, which Izuku soon learns is really just an excuse to beat him up. Kachan has been staying true to his word and makes them train nearly every day after school, although Izuku isn't sure if train is the right word. Just as he expected, Kachan doesn't really know much about actual fighting, just about roughhousing. He never really hurts Izuku, but he's a rowdy boy and he's got muscles and dirty moves to prove it. The first couple of lessons are okay, but eventually their training sessions just turn into Kachan wrestles with Izuku for an hour and always wins. Izuku doesn't know what he expects from him. It's no secret that he's not as big or as strong as Kachan, or most of the other boys in his class, for that regard. Not that he's by any means a runt, he's just on the shorter side. Always has been. Although he supposes that these training sessions do count as him getting exercise, which is never a bad thing. Still, he's getting tired of Kachan repeatedly pinning him to the ground or grappling with him telling him to escape. How can he escape if he's not even learning any real fighting moves? Needless to say, their lessons soon start to involve a lot more of Kachan chasing Izuku around and trying to catch him than any actual fighting moves. They have to make sure Sushi stays inside or goes somewhere else to train, because on more than one occasion the cat has appeared and attacked Kachan's legs while he chases Izuku. Kachan adds it to the list of reasons why he hates Sushi, but Izuku finds it endearing. "He's just being protective of me, Kachan," Izuku says as he pries the cat off of his friend. "It's his way of showing he loves me." Kachan's gaze lands on Sushi, who is glaring daggers at him from a spot in Izuku's arms. The blonde bares his teeth, and the cat hisses in response. "It's his way of being a little shit." Izuku pouts. Over the next 3 years, Sushi continues to grow both in size and personality. He reigns over the Midoriya household absolutely, watching over his humans with sharp eyes, often from atop the kitchen fridge. Izuku has woken up multiple times during the night to find those yellow pale eyes gazing at him from amidst the darkness. It's a little creepy, he's not going to lie, but he loves the feline enough to just accept it. What is a bit harder to accept is the strange habit that Sushi develops only a month after living with them. He starts popping up in random places where he's not supposed to be, like in the neighborhood, on top of other people's cars or roofs, and even at Izuku's school a few times. The Midoriyas don't understand how he does it. All their windows and doors are locked when Inko leaves for work, and they don't have a cat flap, so how? It's a bit nerve-wracking at first, but they take solace in knowing that at least Sushi isn't the only outdoor cat out there. Inko suspects he likes to roam around outside because he probably was born as a stray. So more often than not, Kachan and Izuku will find themselves joined by the fluffy cat on their way back home from school, or whenever they're playing with the other kids in the neighborhood. Like now, for example. Kachan and Izuku are both 10 years old and are going to the arcade by themselves for the first time. Well, actually, they're supposed to meet up with a few other kids from school there, but Auntie Mitsuki manages to convince Inko that if the boys are old enough to walk to school by themselves, then they're old enough to walk to the arcade while the other two mothers have a ladies' day. That still doesn't stop Inko from fretting over her son before they leave, though. Okay, you have enough money for tokens, right?" "Yes, ma'am." And your phone is charged?" "Yes, ma'am." "Not on silent?" "No." "Oh, make sure you—" "Mom," Izuku whines. "I'll be fine. Kachan's coming with me, and we're going to be hanging out with other kids the entire time." Okay, I'm sorry," she apologizes, pressing a worried kiss onto her son's forehead. "Be safe and have fun, all right?" "I will." Izuku beams at her before leaving the house, quickly jogging up to Kachan, who's waiting for him on the sidewalk. The blonde ruffles his hair as he approaches, and Izuku giggles, playfully pushing him away. They start setting off toward the arcade, but as soon as they reach the end of the block, Kachan says, "We're being followed, dumbass." Izuku blinks and glances around. "By who? I don't see any—" "Oh!" When he glances over his shoulder, he sees Sushi gazing up at him from the ground. Once again, he must have followed them from the house. Izuku turns around and coos. "Don't worry, Sushi boy, I'll be back in a few hours, so go on back home." Sushi stares. "Go on, go home," Izuku insists, but the cat doesn't move. He just keeps staring with unblinking yellow eyes. The boy pouts. "Come on, Sush, don't make me take you back myself." "You really gotta train that cat better, Zoo," Kachan grumbles, giving said feline his customary stink eye. "He listens to me sometimes," Izuku protests, but it only makes his friend snicker. Sighing in defeat, he straightens up and says, "Let's just keep going. He'll head on home eventually." They continue walking, and to Izuku's relief, he doesn't hear the soft pitter-pattering of Sushi's paws following them. Soon, they leave their neighborhood and enter the city. The arcade is only a couple of blocks away from this point, not too long of a walk. Still, Izuku feels very grown-up-like, strutting through the streets without an adult by his side. When he glances over his shoulder, Sushi is nowhere in sight, and he lets out a sigh of relief. He hopes that the cat actually goes home instead of just wandering around the neighborhood, but that might be asking too much. For some reason, however, he still gets the feeling that someone is watching him. The hair on the back of his neck prickles and his eyes dart around, but he doesn't spot anything suspicious. Then, a familiar pink-haired boy standing by the arcade at the end of the street spots them and waves them over with a friendly smile. Izu-kun! Katsuki-kun, over here! Pushing the strange feeling out of his mind, Izuku instead plasters a smile on his face and jogs ahead of Kachan to greet their friend. Hey, Haru-kun! Izu-kun! Izuku squeaks as Haru pulls him in to give him a noogie. You guys took forever to get here. Everyone's already inside. Izuku squirms out of his grasp and pouts when he has to fix his curls. Haru just grins and snickers. The other boy had joined their friend group a few months ago when he transferred into their school. He's pretty cool and extremely friendly, so of course that means that Kachan thinks he's annoying. But Izuku doesn't care. He likes hanging out with Haru, and he also brought a couple of other friends into their group that Tsubasa and Inaba quickly befriend. Plus, he has a super neat quirk called Face Shift. Basically, he can shapeshift, just only with his face. Kachan thinks it's useless, but Izuku thinks his friend is just jealous, especially since Haru can spend hours making Izuku laugh by giving himself a duck bill or turning his hair different colors. Haru greets Kachan, getting only a grunt of acknowledgement in response, and leads them into the arcade. There are no overhead lights, but they can still see just fine because all the games and booths are lit up with neon lights. It's loud and a little overwhelming, but Haru just laughs and ushers them along to where their group of friends is waiting. The next few hours are probably the most fun Izuku has ever had. Their group goes around playing nearly every single game they see. Kachan challenges practically everyone to beat him in whatever racing games he can find, and he wins most of the time. Izuku tries to beat him and loses, which, while unfortunate, is never a surprise when it comes to Kachan anymore. But Haru cheers him up by giving himself a lizard tongue and flicking it into his ear. Izuku squeals and runs away, Haru giving chase and pursuing him for a couple of minutes until Kachan gets annoyed and drags Izuku off to play air hockey. Turns out, he's pretty good at it. His explosive friend's face is priceless when Izuku beats him the first time, and only gets more and more comical when Izuku continues to beat him 2 more times. Tsubasa and Haru watch from the sidelines, the latter whooping and cheering for Izuku, which only drives Kachan to fight even harder until he finally wins. Still, at the end, Haru comes up to Izuku and congratulates him. Dang, Izuku, you're really good at air hockey, he says, grinning. Izuku laughs and scratches the back of his head. Thanks, I never thought I'd be. I've never really played it before today. Ah, so you're a natural. Haru puts an arm around him and pointedly ignores the withering glare Kachan sends him. Well, I think you deserve a prize then. Come on, let's check out the claw machines. They wander over to the tall box of prizes, and Izuku quickly spies a stuffed marshmallow-shaped All Might toy. He moves to put a couple of tokens in the slot, but Haru stops him. Allow me, he says smoothly, already grabbing onto the joystick. Izuku blinks. Are you sure? Please, Haru winks. It's my treat. Which one do you want? He presses the start button and proceeds to expertly move the claw around, picking his way through the toys until he reaches the All Might stuffy that Izuku points out. Izuku watches with bated breath as the claw lowers and clasps onto it, bringing it over to the drop box and releasing it without a hitch. Haru grabs the toy and hands it to Izuku with a bit of dramatics, which causes him to giggle as he accepts the gift graciously. Then the taller boy straightens up and beams at him, and something about it makes Izuku's heart feel a little funny. His cheeks grow warm, and he quickly finds himself hiding his burning face behind the plushie. Thanks, he squeals, voice muffled. They all leave soon after that to get lunch somewhere. Kachan still refuses to eat arcade food after that one bout of food poisoning during Tsubasa's 8th birthday party. And as they walk out of the building, Kachan spots some TVs in a shop's window broadcasting a villain fight. Further investigation leads to the realization that it's an All Might villain fight, so naturally this sidetracks them for a while. Watch him here, Kachan says. I bet he's gonna... Bam! See, I told you he'd do that! He pumps his fists, his eyes practically sparkling, as he watches the screen. Man, it doesn't get any cooler than All Might. There's still that other one creeping up on him, though, Haru comments, just as invested as the blonde is. Do you think he'll... Ha! Did you see that? Guy didn't even stand a chance. Izuku watches with rapt attention, too, albeit behind the group of boys. He'd like to get close, but he knows how excited they can get when they watch one of All Might's fights, and he doesn't want to accidentally get in the way of any flying hands. But man, All Might is never not cool. Izuku wishes he'd brought his hero journal with him, despite the fact that All Might already has almost an entire notebook dedicated to just him. A flash of gray in the corner of his eye distracts him, and his head whips around. Was that Sushi? No, it couldn't be. He couldn't have possibly followed him all the way to the arcade. Just to ease his mind, though, Izuku quietly sneaks away from the group just to follow the flash of gray. It disappeared into a nearby alley, but when he reaches it, the cat is nowhere in sight. The alley is dark and full of trash cans and empty crates that lean against the walls. Izuku wrinkles his nose. "Sushi!" he calls out, but the cat doesn't appear. Letting out a sigh of relief, he's about to turn back and rejoin the group when one of the trash bags suddenly rustles. An empty bottle clatters to the ground. "Sushi!" Izuku exclaims, walking into the alley. "Where are you? Come on out, boy!" Silence meets him. The bag rustles again. Izuku frowns. "Are you stuck, buddy?" he asks, jogging over to it. "Don't worry, I'll—" As soon as he gets close, a man suddenly lunges out from behind the trash bags and pounces on him. He immediately screams and scrambles backwards, but the man grabs him and uses his weight to force him to the ground. A hand covers his mouth, muffling his yelp of pain as his back hits the gravel beneath him. Panic floods his system, and he thrashes around wildly, trying to escape, but the man must have some sort of vine quirk because the next moment there's thick black vines wrapping around his body, pinning his arms to his sides and locking his legs together. He wails, but black vines quickly wrap around his mouth, gagging him. The man lets out a huff of laughter as he keeps him pinned to the ground, sneering down at him as he continues to struggle. "Don't make this difficult, kid," he growls. Two vines come up to cover Izuku's eyes, blinding him, and the terror within him escalates as his world is plunged into darkness. The man chuckles in his ear. "It'll be better for both of us if you just play nice. Do something funny and I'll make you regret it." Tears well up in Izuku's eyes as he hears a second pair of heavy footsteps approach them. "Hey," another voice says. "Did you get him?" "Course I did," his attacker replies. Hands grab at Izuku and he feels himself being pulled to his feet. His legs are still bound together so he can't walk, but that doesn't seem to matter to the man as he drags him down the alley. "Good," the second voice says. "You sure he's the right one? There were a bunch of kids in that group." "Course I got the right one," the first voice snaps. Izuku continues to struggle against his grasp, letting out muffled screams until the man gives his head a hard slap. "Oi, you brat, I told you to behave." To his partner, he says, "Don't worry, he's the one. I've been watching this kid for the past 3 weeks. I've seen how his quirk works. Trust me, he'll definitely be worth a pretty penny." Izuku's heart skips a beat at this. They want to sell him? For his quirk? How could this be happening to him? In the back of his mind, he recalls what his mother told him the day his quirk manifested. "Baby, I'm sorry, but you can't just use your quirk on anyone who asks you to, especially not strangers. There are some bad people out there that might want to take you so they can use your quirk." So this is what she was afraid of. This is why she always has Katon following him around. He had never truly understood. He thought that she was just being overprotective, or perhaps was worried about people being mean to him like Furuya and Akamine, but God, this is so much worse than Furuya and Akamine, and this time Katon's not here to save him. He wails again and thrashes around, slamming his head into the captor's chest. The man lets out an oof, and his grip slackens just a little bit, but it's enough for Izuku to wiggle free. Desperation fills his chest as he tries to make his escape, but it's a pathetic attempt. He's only able to turn and hop forwards once, his limbs still bound, before his second captor is upon him. Hands grab at him and pull him backwards, dragging him even further down the alley. They're soon joined by another pair of hands, these ones rougher, and no doubt leaving bruises. "Little brat!" He doesn't even know which one is speaking now, but he's aware of the sudden explosion of pain in his head as one of the men strikes him. "Fucking behave, or I'll make this hell for you." "Just get him in the bag," the other voice snaps. "It'll be easier to bring him in then." Dazed, Izuku feels himself being pushed forward as something is pulled over his head. Fabric? No, he heard the man say bag. They're putting him in a bag. The fabric jolts, and the next thing he knows, his feet are being swept off the ground. He falls onto his side, but his body doesn't hit the ground. Instead, the fabric wraps tighter around him as he gets carried in the bag, his captor's legs hitting him occasionally. Come on now, one of the men grunts. The car's out back. Izuku feels like he's going to be sick. The helpless feeling is worse, so much worse now. He's so pathetic. He can't even do anything. He can't even fight. Why did he ever think that he could stand a chance on his own? He was right when he told Kachan that his quirk was useless. It was stupid of him to ever think otherwise. He wishes his friend was with him now. He'll no doubt be wondering where Izuku went. Oh God, his mother's never going to find out what happened to him. He'll never see her, or Kachan, or any of his friends again. Suddenly, Izuku hears hissing. What the Ah! One of the men suddenly shouts. Izuku's abruptly dropped to the ground, and he grunts, wondering what's going on. He can hear hissing and spitting, and one of his captors is yelling, but no, wait. He's heard that hiss before. He hears it every time Kachan comes over to his house, but it can't be. Sushi? He cries, his voice muffled by the black vines. What the fuck is wrong with this fucking cat? The man shrieks. Get it off! Get it off! You know, they say cats are excellent judges of character. An entirely new voice suddenly says. Feet hit the ground with a loud thud, and the vines around Izuku disappear. He blinks at the darkness of the bag, confused and terrified. He doesn't know what's happening, but he thinks the new person is fighting his captors, if the sounds of punching and grunting are anything to go by. Something sharp pokes at his arm, and he flinches, feeling a heavy but all too familiar weight settle on top of him. Tears leak out of his eyes. Sushi? He hiccups. A loud meow in his ear is the response he gets, and he winces as the cat starts trying to claw the bag open. It's enough to spur him into action to try and get out on his own, but his movements are slow and awkward. His head is still throbbing in pain from when one of the men struck him, and he feels extremely nauseous when he pushes himself onto his hands and knees. There's not much space in the bag, and the fabric presses against his face as he straightens up, trying to figure out where the opening is. He kicks and pushes everywhere he can, but it must be tied shut because nothing budges. Sushi, he cries, trembling with fear. I'm stuck, I can't. Hang on, kid, the new voice says, and suddenly there's hands pulling at the bag from the outside. I've almost got you. The light pierces his eyes and he winces, blinking rapidly. As soon as he's freed from the bag, Sushi climbs onto his lap and nuzzles his face, purring loudly. He lets out a wet chuckle of relief, wrapping his arms around the feline before he blearily looks up. A black-haired man with a scarf wrapped around his neck is crouched in front of him, staring at him with thinly veiled worry. It's obvious that he is the one who saved him, but Izuku is dazed and shaken from the attack, so when the man reaches towards him, he can't help but flinch away. The man notices and immediately retracts his hand, instead reaching into his pocket to pull out a plastic card. I'm an underground hero, the man says, showing him the card. My name's Eraserhead. It's all right, I won't hurt you. I just want to see where you're injured. Izuku blinks at him slowly, still clutching his cat to his chest. An underground hero. A pro-hero. He knows he'd normally be freaking out right now, either asking the hero a million questions or begging him for his autograph. Probably both, but all he can do is let his eyes slide past the man to the far wall, where his two kidnappers are leaning against each other unconscious. They seem to be tied up in some sort of gray cloth. He looks to his right to see a parked car only a few feet away, its trunk wide open. The bag is on the ground next to him. Then he looks back at Eraserhead and promptly bursts into tears. He cries harder than he's ever cried in his life, tears and snot dripping down his face as relief crashes into him. He hugs Sushi tight and just sobs into his fur, his dissipating fear and adrenaline leaving him trembling violently. Eraserhead waits patiently for him to cry himself out, putting a large hand on his shoulder in an awkward attempt at comfort. Izuku was nearly taken. He was nearly kidnapped for his quirk. For what he gave out of generosity, people just wanted to take, to steal, without any regard for him, and, oh God, it's so much worse than any middle school bullies. Those men were watching him. If he hadn't been there. Izuku is suddenly all too aware that the car is still only a few feet away. His stomach flips and he sobs even harder. Eventually, probably a solid 5 minutes later, Izuku finally manages to lift his head up from Sushi's now thoroughly soaked fur and croaks brokenly. Thank you. No problem, Eraserhead says, blinking down at him. What's your name, kid? Midoriya Izuku, he replies, slightly slurred. Did you hit your head? When Izuku nods shakily, the hero takes out a small flashlight from his utility belt and shines it into his eyes. You have a mild concussion. Are you hurting anywhere else? Izuku nods again, and Eraserhead proceeds to check him head to toe, speaking softly to him the entire time. Aside from the concussion, he just has a bunch of scrapes and bruises, most of them from the vines, which, Eraserhead explains, disappeared because he used his quirk to erase the first man's quirk. That's cool, Izuku murmurs, giving him a weary smile. Thanks, Eraserhead huffs. I'm gonna call the police to take these guys in. Do you have any idea why they targeted you? Yeah, Izuku replies, sniffling. His voice is small and shaky as he says, My quirk, they wanted me for my quirk. It's a healing quirk, and they said they wanted to sell me, I think. He squeezes his eyes shut at the memory and hugs Sushi tighter. When he opens them again, Eraserhead's jaw is clenched. Right, he grunts. Well, sit tight, kid. Eraserhead keeps a comforting hand on his shoulder as he fishes out his phone and calls the police. As he reports what happened, Izuku fumbles around with his own phone and is relieved to see that it isn't damaged. The light hurts his eyes, but he notices the numerous text messages and missed calls that had popped up on his screen. His fingers are trembling too hard to type out a proper message, but he manages to send his location to Kachan before his phone slips from his hands. You shouldn't use your phone when you have a concussion, Eraserhead says. The hero sits down heavily next to him and leans against the wall. He raises an eyebrow at Sushi, who doesn't seem to mind his presence too much. Is that your cat? Izuku nods. Mm-hmm. His name is Sushi. That seems to amuse the pro-hero, who lets out a snort. He's not supposed to be out here, Izuku adds, mostly because he doesn't want to sit in silence. He usually only stays in our neighborhood, but he wouldn't listen to me when I told him to go home. Yeah, cats aren't exactly obedient, Eraserhead replies. He glances at the entrance of the alleyway, which Izuku didn't realize was so far away. The villains must have dragged him farther than he thought. He's at the opposite end of the alley. That opens up into a barren parking lot, hence the car. The car that he almost got trapped in. The car that almost took him away from his life forever. Izuku sniffles again and tightens his grip on Sushi. Where are your parents? The underground hero asks, pulling him out of his thoughts. Are they nearby? No, I was with... Zuku! Eraserhead tenses up as Kachan appears at the entrance of the alley, panting heavily. His crimson eyes land on the man and he bares his teeth, charging forward. Who the hell are you? He snarls, explosions popping in his palms. Get away from him! Kachan, wait! Izuku cries. Eraserhead stands up and intercepts the blonde before he can reach them. His scar flares around him and his eyes flash red, causing the explosions to disappear. Kachan only manages to look down at his hands in surprise before the scarf wraps around him, binding him tightly. What the hell? Kachan screeches, thrashing around. Get off me, I'll kill you! Kachan! Izuku yells more insistently. The loud noises are killing his head, but he ignores it for now. Stop! He's a pro-hero! You know this kid? Eraserhead asks, sounding a bit unimpressed. Izuku confirms and he sighs, loosening his grip slightly. Relax, kid. I'm not going to hurt your friend here. He was just attacked by a couple of villains and I took them down. He turns slightly so Kachan can see the unconscious men still tied together. Kachan's eyes narrow before he squirms out of his scarf. Zuku! He runs over to Izuku and kneels down in front of him, grabbing his shoulders lightly. Are you all right? What the hell happened? And what the fuck is Sushi doing here? Sushi, who is still curled up against Izuku's chest, hisses and tries to swipe at Kachan, but the boy dodges. I... Izuku stutters. They The pain in his head is making it hard for him to talk, and he kinda just wants to take a nap, but he forces his eyes to stay open. Thankfully, Eraserhead explains for him. Those guys were trying to kidnap him and sell him off, he states bluntly. Kachan's eyes widen, and he whips his head to look at him. Eraserhead continues. Healing quirks are rare and considered valuable, so... I know that, Kachan snaps. Eraserhead's eye twitches, but Kachan just turns back to Izuku, hands flexing like he doesn't know what to do with them. Shit, Zuku, are you... His eyes roam over him, from his bruised arms and face to his glazed eyes. His jaw clenches. Shit, 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 shit. If you could call his parents, that would be helpful, Eraserhead interrupts. Kachan, surprisingly, does so without much fuss. Izuku cringes at the police sirens as they get closer. His head feels like it's about to explode, and he's even more tired now. He can hear Kachan on the phone with his mother, who is no doubt freaking out. Eraserhead helps him to his feet and leads him to one of the police cars, ushering Kachan in as well before turning to help some of the officers put the two villains into another car. He's not coming with us, Kachan asks as the officer in front drives away. Heroes don't usually accompany victims to the police station, kid, the officer replies. He has to stay behind to give his report, and then he'll probably just continue his patrol. Right, I knew that, Kachan grumbles under his breath. He glances at Izuku, who is idly petting Sushi with drooping eyelids as he leans against his shoulder. Hey, stay awake! Izuku whines but obliges. The drive to the police station is fairly quick, and soon Izuku's being examined by a nurse, who confirms that he has a mild concussion. Kachan has to hold Sushi the whole time, which neither of them are happy about. He shifts in his seat impatiently while she cleans and bandages Izuku's scrapes, telling him to take it easy for the next few days to give his brain time to heal. Thankfully, it's summer break, so at least he won't have to take time off of school. Then a police officer comes in and asks him a bunch of questions, helping him file a report which he writes down on his clipboard. Kachan stays silent the entire time, only occasionally growling at a particular detail or grumbling when Sushi digs his claws into his lap. Once the report is complete, the officer hands it off to someone else before waiting with them for their parents to arrive. 10 minutes later, Inko bursts in with Auntie Mitsuki and Uncle Masaru at her heels. She's already a blubbering mess, but when she sees Izuku's bruised face, she cries even harder. Oh, my baby, she sobs, hugging him tightly. My baby, my poor baby. Glad to see you're okay, kiddo, Auntie Mitsuki says, then turns to Kachan with a scowl on her face. And where the hell were you? Hey, I thought he was with me the whole time, Kachan snaps. I didn't even realize they'd taken him until... Guys, please, the officer interrupts, raising her hands. Lower your voices. Midoriya-kun has a concussion, and yelling isn't going to make him feel better. Inko whimpers and buries her face into her son's hair. Sushi, who made the mistake of climbing back into Izuku's lap while they were waiting, meows in distress as he's squished between them. Sushi, Inko hiccups, pulling away slightly. Well, what are you doing here? Izuku smiles tiredly and snuggles him closer. He tried to fight off the bad guys, he says, a hint of pride in his voice. Inko looks confused. Uncle Masaru turns to the police officer and asks, Please, can you tell us exactly what happened? We only got a vague idea from Katsuki. Did someone really try to kidnap Izuku? The officer nods and repeats what was reported by both Izuku and Eraserhead. Inko looks like she's about to faint when she hears that the villains wanted to sell Izuku for his quirk. Auntie Mitsuki growls and Uncle Masaru tenses up, casting a worried look toward the boy. When the officer is done, she informs Inko of Izuku's injuries and tells her that he'll need to take it easy for the next few days and get lots of rest. Inko nods hastily and thanks the officers before helping her son into the car. She was still with Auntie Mitsuki when she got the call from Kachan, so the woman drove her and Uncle Masaru to the station in her car. It's a bit of a squeeze with 5 people and a cat, but they make it back home with relative ease. When they get out of the car, Kachan, who was silent the entire ride, asks Inko if he and Izuku can have a sleepover. Oh, of course, Inko says. I'll put the futon in Izuku's room. Just remember that he needs a lot of rest and no video games. They're bad for his concussion. It's fine, Kachan replies. I just want to. He trails off, eyeing Izuku before glancing away with gritted teeth. Inko smiles understandingly and nods. Do you mind if Masaru and I come over for a bit? Auntie Mitsuki asks. I can help you cook dinner, and you look like you could use some company. Thank you, Inko sighs. So they all enter the Midoriya household, Inko helping Izuku to the couch like he's made of glass. Kachan and Sushi settle in beside him, while the adults move to the kitchen. There's not much to do since he's not allowed to watch TV, but he's too tired to do that anyway, so he just lets his head drop onto his friend's shoulder. After a moment, Kachan wraps his arm around Izuku and pulls him closer, resting his chin on top of his curls. Izuku lets out a soft sigh, closing his eyes and listening to his friend breathe. He can hear the adults in the kitchen and Inko's muffled cries. His mother is obviously trying to keep her voice low as she speaks with Auntie Mitsuki and Uncle Masaru in hushed tones, but her sniffling and occasional whimpers are as clear as day. His heart aches for her. He knows how badly this must have shaken her. But right now, he's too tired to even consider consoling her. So, with his head on Kachan's shoulder and his cat curled up against him, Izuku drifts off to sleep. If some fucker comes along and decides to snatch Izuku because he wants to force him to use his quirk, what are you gonna do? I'll beat him up, of course. I'll beat up any fucker who tries to take him. Katsuki is Zuku's protector. He knows this. It's been this way for over half their lives now, and not once has he complained about it. The role comes as naturally to him as the explosions in his palms do. Those guys were trying to kidnap him and sell him off. His arm tightens around Zuku's sleeping form. But this time, someone else had to save him. Someone else had to be his protector. Someone else had to do Katsuki's damn job for him. And fuck, if they hadn't, Zuku would be... Auntie Inko's soft cries from the kitchen reach his ears, interrupting his thoughts. He can hear his mother's voice, gentler than he's ever heard, trying to soothe her, as she tries to muffle her sobs. His chest suddenly feels too tight. He knows that if he looks down, he'll see the numerous scrapes and bruises from the villains littering Zuku's skin. And where the hell were you? And where the hell were you? And where the hell were you? Zuku lets out a soft whimper. Katsuki immediately loosens his hold around him, having unconsciously tightened his arm into a vice grip. Zuku relaxes against him once more, but the burning, self-loathing anger remains. There's something else to it, though. He's used to anger. There's not a day that passes in which he doesn't get angry at one thing or another, but this is different. This is what he felt back when he saw the bruises those two upperclassmen assholes left on Zuku, or what he felt when he saw that dog going to attack him. Except it's worse, because he didn't win. He didn't fight. He didn't protect him. This is Katsuki's first taste of failure, and he doesn't like it one bit. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 3 of The Roundabout Way of Fate. Chapter 4 will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this fic. Let me know those thoughts and reactions in the comments below. I really like the fact that the author continues to pull back some of these flashback scenes. Even just focusing on some of the dialogue that Katsuki is internalizing, like some of Mitsuki's words. I'm just curious to hear what you all think about the dynamic between Katsuki and Izuku at this point, and just where you think this fic might go. But I'd love to, regardless, hear any of your thoughts and reactions. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.